Meanwhile, Jake had worked harder than ever. With Sarah's help, he got into a good high school and later earned a scholarship to study medicine. He had never forgotten his dream, becoming a doctor to help those in need, just like his mother once needed. One evening, Sarah sat in her office staring at the pile of paperwork in front of her. The weight of expectations, of responsibilities that never truly felt like hers, pressed down on her. She thought about Jake, about how he had fought against every obstacle in his way, how he had never given up. A sudden impulse took over. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. "Hello," a familiar voice answered, slightly deeper but still carrying the warmth she remembered. "Jake, it's me." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Sarah. Wow, it's been a while." She smiled, a real smile, for the first time in what felt like forever. "Yeah, it has. Listen, I was thinking, I need a change. And I was wondering if maybe I could help you with what you're doing." Jake was silent for a moment before he spoke. His voice filled with something close to excitement. "Sarah, are you sure? This is a whole different world from what you're used to." "I've never been more sure of anything." And just like that, their journey came full circle. Sarah, the girl who once offered a simple burger to a lost boy, found herself stepping into a new purpose. And Jake, the boy who once had nothing, was now a man on the verge of changing lives. Some friendships don't fade with time. Some moments, though small at first, grow into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. And sometimes, a single act of kindness can change not just one life, but two. Sarah wiped down the counter at Mason's cafe, her hands moving almost on autopilot. It must have been the 100th time she had done it that morning, though she had lost count long ago. The little diner nestled in downtown Los Angeles wasn't anything fancy. No chandeliers, no marble floors, no 5-star ratings. But to Sarah, it was home. At just 17 years old, she knew every inch of the place. She knew which booth had a cracked seat, which floorboard squeaked no matter how carefully you stepped, and even the exact time Mr. Thompson would push open the door, ready for his usual coffee and eggs. "Same old day," she muttered under her breath, adjusting her name tag with a sigh. But at exactly 9:45 a.m., the bell above the door jingled, and Sarah barely looked up, expecting another regular. Instead, her breath hitched. A boy no older than 12 stood there, soaked from head to toe, his thin frame wrapped in a tattered, dirty blanket. His brown hair was plastered to his forehead, and his shoes, if you could call them that, were falling apart. But it wasn't just his appearance that stopped her. It was his eyes. There was something in them. Something deeper than just exhaustion. A kind of pain, a kind of loneliness, that struck Sarah in a way she couldn't explain. Before she even realized what she was doing, she grabbed a burger from the kitchen and walked straight toward him. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "You need this more than I do." The boy hesitated. His eyes darted between Sarah and the food, as if he was unsure whether to accept kindness from a stranger. But hunger won. Slowly, with shaking hands, he reached out and took the burger. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was soft, barely more than a breath, but the weight behind it was undeniable. In that moment, neither of them knew it, but this one simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. That night, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about him. His face stayed in her mind like an imprint she couldn't shake. She tossed and turned in bed, wondering where he was sleeping, if he was warm, if he had eaten again. The next afternoon after school, her feet carried her not home, but to the small park where she had seen him last. And there he was, huddled beneath the same thin blanket, looking even smaller than she remembered. This time she didn't just bring food. She carried a bag filled with a sweatshirt, warm socks, and a sandwich. "Hey," she said softly, sitting down beside him. "I brought you some things." His eyes widened. "You came back." "Of course," Sarah said without hesitation. "Why wouldn't I?" That was the day she learned his name. Slowly, piece by piece, he shared his story. His mother had passed away when he was little. His father, drowning in alcohol and anger, had abandoned him to the streets. But despite it all, despite the hunger, the cold, the loneliness, Jake had a dream. "I want to be a doctor someday," he admitted, his voice carrying a quiet but unwavering hope. "I want to help people like my mom. She deserved better." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. Her own life wasn't perfect. Her parents fought constantly, and she often felt lost in a house that never truly felt like home. But hearing Jake's story, it made her realize just how much she had taken for granted. From that day on, she visited him every afternoon. She brought food, clothes, even books. Some days they talked for hours. Other days they sat in silence, watching the world go by. But little by little, Jake began to trust her. He even let her teach him math using an old notebook she had lying around at home. But not everyone understood what Sarah was doing. Her best friend, Emily, noticed the bags of supplies disappearing from Sarah's house. "What are you doing, Sarah?" Emily asked one afternoon. "You don't even know this kid. What if he's dangerous?" "He's not dangerous," Sarah shot back, defensive. "He's just alone. Like me." Emily sighed. "You're risking a lot for someone you barely know." But Sarah didn't care. Something inside her told her this was right. Every time she saw Jake smile or heard him talk about his dream of becoming a doctor, she felt like she was making a difference, not just in his life but in her own. She had no idea just how much that difference would mean in the years to come. Winter hit Los Angeles harder than usual that year. The nights turned brutal, the cold cutting like a blade. Jake's blanket wasn't enough anymore. Sarah couldn't stand it. She lay awake at night, imagining him shivering on a park bench, while she was wrapped in warmth beneath her soft sheets. Then, one night, after another screaming match between her parents, she made a bold decision. She stormed into her father's study, where he was reading the newspaper. "Dad," she said, her voice steady, even though her heart pounded. "Can Jake stay in the guest house? Just until it warms up." Her dad frowned, lowering the paper. "Who's Jake?" "He's someone I've been helping. He's homeless. And he's just a kid." Her father's expression darkened. "Sarah, you can't just bring strangers into our home. You don't know anything about him." "I know enough," she insisted. "He's smart, he works hard, and he wants to be a doctor someday. Please, Dad. It's freezing out there." Her dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine. But if there's any trouble, he's out." Sarah didn't waste a second. She ran to tell Jake the news, and for the first time since she met him, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. "Oh, you're serious?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm serious." He grinned. "It's not much, but it's safe. And hey, maybe we can figure out a way to get you into school." And they did. With Sarah's help, and a few forged documents from her father, Jake got enrolled in middle school. For the first time in years, he had a roof over his head, regular meals, and a chance to focus on his future. But life wasn't easy. One day, as Jake walked home from school, a man stepped out of the shadows. His father. "You think you're too good for me now?" The man slurred, clearly drunk. "I hear you're living high on the hog with some rich girl. Hand over some cash." Jake's stomach twisted. "I don't have any money." The man grabbed him by the collar. "Don't lie to me, boy. Leave him alone." The voice was sharp, fierce. "Sarah." She had been looking for Jake when she saw what was happening. Without hesitation, she stepped between them. "If you touch him again, I'll call the police." The man glared at her. But after a tense moment, he backed away, muttering curses under his breath. As he disappeared into the night, Jake turned to Sarah. His eyes filled with something deeper than gratitude. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. "Yes, I did," she said firmly. "You're my friend, Jake. And friends protect each other." That moment changed everything. And neither of them had any idea how much further their journey would go. To be continued.